This podcast contains explicit content and is intended for mature audiences. Listener discretion is advised. Don't say we didn't warn you.
Hi, and welcome. My name is Madison.
And I'm Hannah.
And you are listening to or watching Who's Knocking?
A true crime podcast.
Hello, hello. So here we are with Charles Sobhraj part 2. I don't really recall how I was pronouncing his name in the first episode, but I'm going with Sobhraj now.
Okay.
I've been listening to a lot of interviews and things, and it seems like that's the pronunciation.
We'll go with it.
So we'll go with it. And yeah, pretty excited to get into it. This one's much more, we'll get into much more gruesome detail in this one, but it's still, we're still not quite at the murders yet. How you doing? How you doing this week? How's everyone doing?
Oh, good. Just over here doing dog stuff.
Yeah. Yeah,
What about you?
Not too much. Just it was a really nice day today, and all the snow has melted, so I'm extremely happy about that.
I know. Finally a light at the end of this tunnel this winter.
Yeah. For anyone who's not from Canada, it's harsh winters over here.
Yeah. It's just ridiculously cold.
And this episode specifically, it's all throughout Asia and Thailand and stuff, and all these really warm places. So it's been giving me a little bit of a in my head vacation.
Oh, that's nice. A
very
murdery
vacation. Vacation.
Yeah.
So you want to get into it?
Sure.
Let's do it. Okay. Here we are. So I'll do a recap.
Oh, okay.
Last week.
You do recaps now?
No, because I'm gonna
because I
look
did
like an asshole if I don't do recaps.
I don't know. I want to know if people think if it's good or bad if we do recaps.
It's even good for me because people don't know this, but we recorded 2 weeks ago, so
right.
I kind of needed myself. I was reading the recap this morning and I was like, oh yeah,
how that happened.
But okay, so here's a recap.
Okay.
So in episode 1, we learned about Charles's childhood. His main gripes with his family were his father essentially abandoning him, his mother remarrying a man who he did not respect, and then he technically had no citizenship to any country until age 24, and that was he didn't love that. And among other many little things that happened to him throughout his childhood. Charles spent most of his teen years and early 20s committing petty crimes, mostly stealing, trading on the black market, and fraud activities, writing bad checks, etc.
Sure.
He went to prison for a couple years and met that guy, Felix. And then when he got out, married a woman named Chantal. And even though many people warned her not to get involved with Charles because he's a criminal and kind of a dick, she did so anyway. And the couple had a baby together and they moved to Bombay, India. They made a hasty getaway after Charles was arrested for robbery. And also, I guess it would have been holding this girl hostage and shit. It wasn't just a robbery. And they were caught once again in Afghanistan just before getting to the Iranian border. So both Charles and Chantal were arrested, and their 1-year-old daughter was sent back to France to be cared for by Chantal's parents. Charles again faked another ailment that got him sent to the hospital. I think this was a peptic ulcer, by the way.
Wasn't he injuring himself?
Yes. So the first time he
Remind me what they did.
The first time he faked symptoms of an appendicitis. So then he got his appendix removed.
Oh my God, I remember that now.
A fucking psychopath.
That's so psycho. I would never do that.
Yeah, and then he escaped
oh my God,
fresh out of surgery, and then because he was weak, they caught him. But then after that, he was like,
God.
okay, what can I fake that doesn't require surgery? So he's faking the symptoms of a peptic ulcer. So what he does, I don't know if I said it, but he like gets his hand on like a syringe and needle,
No.
takes his own blood, puts it in his mouth, and then pretends to throw it up.
Oh my God. I guess that's better than getting your appendix out, but
It's better than surgery, but like you have to remove your own blood.
You have to get a needle.
Yeah, like I'm so much better with needles now because I have to get them all the fucking time. But both Hanna and I, both Hanna and I have had a very big needle phobia.
I still do.
Something we bonded over. I still have it.
Yeah. I
just like know how to handle it better now. I no longer cry and freak out.
I'd still cry for sure.
Yeah, I've had to, if you ever want to get over a needle phobia, get pregnant because they just love sticking you as shit when you're pregnant.
Oh my God.
In your blood. And I had to get extra stuff for various reasons. And I had also, just side note, interesting story. I had them at the blood lab. They like have to test your blood a number of times throughout pregnancy. And they kept throwing out my blood samples because the name, like it was under like my mom's last name. And I kept being like, change my last name. And they kept like so not doing it. So the blood lab would be like, this doesn't match. Toss 3 times.
So you had to keep getting more?
Yes.
Oh my God. It's like my worst nightmare.
It was so extremely rude. Yeah, it takes a lot to get to like go to like for the people at my doctor's office to be like, oh, okay, I'll just simply change it in a computer. Anyway. So after that, yes, he faked another ailment to get himself sent to the hospital where he escaped again. Then he made it to Pakistan. And from there, I don't know if he was by boat or by plane, but he then went back to Paris. So right now, Chantal is still in prison in Kabul, Afghanistan, and Charles has made it to Paris. So in Paris, Charles was technically a fugitive in France still, from the time that he escaped. You know, that's when he and Chantal had escaped because he was forging all these checks, or like he was using a bank account and saying like, using more money than was in the bank account. And so then they fled to Bombay. So he's still a fugitive in France. So he had to be very careful. The main purpose of going back there was to get his daughter. He had a plan to go get her from Chantal's parents and then go back to Afghanistan and break Chantal out of prison. And then he would, his plan was.
Seems like you would want to break her out first and then get the daughter.
He was like, I really miss my daughter. It's like,
yeah,
it's just like a lot. It's weird. It's always weird when like these guys seem to like really care about their children. I mean, it's not weird in some ways,
that's true.
In other ways, it's like very clear that she will have such a better life with Chantal's normal ass parents in Paris than like being on the run with her parents who are constantly in and out of prison. Like
that's true.
So I don't know. But he really wanted to go get her and then break Chantal out of prison. So, and then his plan was to get new identities for all of them and then just start a new life. Easy peasy. That would be great. So he shows up at Chantal's parents' house and he like watches them for a bit and waited for the dad to leave. And then he knocked on the door and Chantal's mother answered. And she was very shocked to see him because she knows like about the imprisonments and that Chantal's in prison and whatever. And he's supposed to be in prison. And she's super shocked and she's like, he looks like shit. And yeah, he's all like gaunt. He's had like all these medical procedures.
He's
like shows up looking like trash. She's like, ew, what do you want? But also I'm sure she's kind of scared because she's like, you're
right,
the devil. But he told her that Chantal had become very sick in prison, so they allowed the both of them to come back to France.
Is that how that works?
Yeah, no. But he just like comes in all frantic and tells her that that's what happened and that that Chantal was asking to see her parents and the baby.
Okay.
So Chantal's mother is like really kind of sketched out, but like he convinces her. So she goes with him and she asks a lot of questions and is like super worried. But Charles is like really vague and pretty much just says like, they're running tests right now. We think she'll be okay, but like just come and we'll get it sorted out. So like makes it seem very urgent.
Okay.
So Charles brought Chantal's mother and the bebe to the Hilton. You will see Charles fucking loves the Hilton. He's always at the Hilton. Like, he loves it.
Why the Hilton?
Every time he sees a hotel, it's a Hilton, according to this book. So at that Hilton, he prepaid for 2 nights. He brought the mother up to the room, and then he pretended to be on a phone call with the hotel doctor and like was like, oh yeah, half an hour. Okay, cool. And so he told Chantal's mother that they could see her in half an hour. And in the meantime, he made her a cup of tea. And after drinking said tea, the mother kneeled over and passed the fuck out.
That's so weird. Yeah. I wonder why.
Yeah.
So I would never drink anything he offered me.
For after listening to this, I'll never drink anything anyone offers me.
Yeah, I already don't, but it's a good reminder not to.
Yeah, well, it's a very good reminder. Like, watch your drinks, people.
Yeah. I can't believe he poisoned her, not even just knocked her out.
No, he did just knock her out. Like, he didn't kill her.
Okay.
She's just
that would be so shitty.
No. Okay. That would be unnecessary.
Yeah.
So Charles threw a do not disturb sign on the door. He scooped up the baby and took off. He made sure to tell the front desk on the way out not to disturb the mother. And he said that she had a long trip ahead, so she really needed to rest. So just don't bother her.
Mm-hmm.
And just like that, Charles had what he wanted and he was off. In a matter of 3 weeks, Charles was back in Pakistan. So I believe he would have gone by boat. Once he gets to Pakistan, he hired this English girl, and we're calling her Marilyn. We don't know what her real name is, but it doesn't really matter. Okay. To be the nanny for the baby. And
my God,
because he
could have just left her.
God forbid he takes care of his own child as he's on.
Yeah. You might as well literally have just left her where she was. What difference would it make?
He's a man, so he can't, be doing diapers and stuff.
That doesn't make any sense. Just leave her where she is then.
Yeah. And you'll see she gets in the way. So the 3 of them begin a journey to go get Chantal from the Kabul prison. Although I'm sure Marilyn really had no idea what the fuck they were doing.
Yeah.
So the plan was to go to first get to Tehran. So Charles had rented a car and off they went. They were picked up somewhere along the way because the authorities were suspicious of Charles's passport because the baby had peed on it at some point. And so the picture was coming off. And so at that point, the authorities searched his car. They found a bunch of fake passports and they arrested him. He was put under some sort of house arrest, but then he snaked his way out with the girls and was free once again. Really didn't stop him very much. And they rented another car, but this one came with a driver. And that was very annoying, but Charles had a plan. Are you, I can't hear you. Did you say anything?
I'm saying something now. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Okay. Sorry.
Okay.
It looked like you were talking, but anyway. So he's contrives this plan. He goes to a local market. He acquired some pharmaceutical supplies and spiked the driver's drink to knock him out, and he was out. Charles, being the nice guy that he was, let him sleep it off in the trunk.
So nice.
So they continue on. Charles is now driving, and he's starting to develop more plans in his head, how he's going to break Chantal out of prison, where they go from there. He's thinking it might be a good idea to get Marilyn arrested for something so that she could be in prison with Chantal. And that way he could tell her how to break them both out. And his plan would require Marilyn to draw up a map of the inside of the prison. So he thinks he's going to need another girl so that she can like go visit Marilyn, and then Marilyn could like sneak plans out so that Charles can have the plans, and then he can like break her out somehow.
That's elaborate.
Yes, it's very elaborate. But so as luck would have it, Charles found a Dutch girl named Diana. don't know if that's a real name.
Okay.
She was traveling alone and also headed to Tehran, and she happily accepted a free ride along with the gang. So Charles's biggest hurdle yet happened just a little ways into the ride. He was passing an area and he's like, okay, this looks like a perfect place where I can just drop off the driver. If everything goes well, the guy will like keep sleeping and then eventually he'll wake up. And by that point we'll be long gone and easy, no problem. So Charles pulls over. He tells the girls to stay in the car. He opens the trunk and this foul odor smacks him in the face because the guy is dead and he shit himself.
Oh, how long has he been in there?
Long enough to die.
That's so sad, but oh my God.
Yeah,
Imagine.
it's awful. And like he didn't even mean to kill him, and he's like, fuck, like, and there was just
no air in there or something?
Well, he claims that there was enough air in that, but it's like,
how would he know?
He didn't know how, like, he just literally poisoned him. Like, he drugged him. Yeah. It's like, you don't know if this guy has a heart problem. You don't know, like, if this guy is breathing properly or like he woke up and like had a panic attack and couldn't breathe. Like, who knows what happened?
I mean, he probably did have a fucking panic attack. I think I would too if I woke up in a trunk.
Well, we don't even know if he woke up. Maybe, like, who knows if this guy just like had a like bad heart and like the drugs were enough to kill him. We just don't know.
That's perfect.
And so, but Charles like is immediately just like straight up annoyed. He's like, fuck, what am I? This is just like another thing. Blah, blah.
So annoying. Wow.
So Charles, he couldn't understand how this happened. Super annoyed. And then to top it all off, he turns around to see Diana standing there witnessing the whole thing, even though he specifically told her to stay in the car. So
at that point.
Yeah. So I'm like, fuck, Diana, you're dead. But he got back in the car. They continued driving. Diana was clearly traumatized from what she had seen and smelled.
Fair.
And so now Charles had to come up with a plan to make Diana feel like she was involved somehow so that she would keep her mouth shut. So they drove until they hit a foresty-ish area. And then until they hit a bridge that went over some sort of river. And this is where Charles decided he would dump the body. So Charles asked Diana to help him undress the body. And then he pushed him into the water. And this was the first time that Charles dumped a dead body, but it would not be the last.
Oh.
And so Charles and Diana get back into the car and they continue driving to Iran. And Marilyn is also there. And I don't know if she's like just not seeing any of this. Like, I don't know how.
How could you not be?
There was no explanation about like if she saw things or if she didn't, or like, and I don't, maybe she is like more involved with Charles and like he does seem to have this effect on women where he can like make them do whatever the fuck he wants.
That could be what's happening because it's like there's no way she wouldn't see him taking a body off
and rolling it
a bridge or a hill. And what she get like if he told her to like close her eyes or something, you know what I mean? Like, yeah. And yeah, what's she gonna do?
Exactly.
So, but it's weird. Maybe she just was like too afraid to like when she realized what was going on. Maybe she was just too afraid. She's like, what am I going to do? Leave? Like, I'm by myself. Don't know where to go. Like, plus he's scary. So
is he going to kill me?
Yeah, exactly. So that's what I would guess is going on.
Yeah. That just is an unexplained part, but not the most important part. So
right.
I digress.
It is interesting though, like how he got. It's always interesting to me when murderers like get people to be accomplices.
Yes, it's a skill. It's a skill that some people, and like we saw this in the last episode, like when he ran away with his friend Michael, and like the difference between like the two similar aged boys and like how they could. Like how Charles could just like slither his way into becoming friends with people and meeting people and like getting favors. Like he can get whatever he wants from people. And it's because he's really, really good at reading people. And like, there's a lot of explanation in the book about like how exactly he does this. And he He meets people, he like lets them talk, he learns about them. He's like, I always wait for them to invite me places. I always like, and like he just like says,
That's very strategic. Like, that's smart.
a lot of people are not super comfortable just like straight up lying to people. He is very comfortable just saying like, oh, I'm a psychologist, I work at this university, this is what I do. And like, why would you think they're lying? You don't imagine that people are
Right.
lying.
Yeah.
And
That's
that sort
very,
of
I mean,
thing.
so many killers do that.
Yeah, but it's like somebody who just like so like confidently can just like lie to people in,
Yeah.
like that is a skill, and like it's an unassuming quality that's really useful if you're just trying to get shit from people,
Right.
you know.
Yeah.
And
So creepy.
he's really good at it. It's so creepy. So they dump the body, they take his clothes, whatever. And so finally, Charles, his daughter, Marilyn, and Diana make it to Tehran. They got a room at the Hilton Tehran,
Oh, of
Hilton.
course. Where else would they stay?
Yeah, where they were just going to stay in to get some rest. But again, things took a downward turn for Charles.
Oh.
He had tried to deal with Diana and even get her more involved in his schemes. He was trying to like groom her basically, and like get her to like spike people's drinks and stuff, and like that way she would feel involved or whatever.
Hate that.
But she ended up running away. She got away.
Oh shit.
So like good for Diana, but not good for Charles.
Yeah.
So
Whatever.
but also Charles is like, he has gotten away and slipped out of the police so many times. He just feels invincible. So he's just like,
Right.
oh, I'm sure it'll be fine. Like the police might come for me, but like I'll just escape, or I'll just like they're not gonna get me. They never do. So he just goes to his room and like no trouble sleeping, just like la la la.
Wow.
The next morning, the police showed up at Charles's hotel room. Charles kept his cool. He didn't think they had much. They found a bunch of passports and passport altering tools in his room, but you know, he was like, okay, this is gonna be fine. However, when he got downstairs, he saw like the amount of guys there were. They were driving these like big luxury cars, and then he was blindfolded, and he's like, oh shit, these are not the police. These are the Savak. I think we call them Savak, which is the Shah of Iran's secret police. So this was much more severe than we thought. I think like it's the Savak are the intelligence and security organization of the country. It was like the Iranian KGB basically. So not people that you want to fuck around with, and not people that you can easily bribe, and people who are known for like torturing and killing people.
Fuck.
So like quite a bit more severe than the local police.
Yeah.
It turns out that after Diana had run away, she had a one night stand with an Iranian man, and she told him about Charles and the passports. And although it doesn't seem like she told him about the dead body, but it turned out that this guy was an agent for the Savak. And I don't know if they call it the Savak or the SAVAK or whatever.
Okay.
But he arrested Diana, and then once detained, she gave more information about Charles, and that's how they found him.
Wow.
So the Savak.
What are the odds of that?
I don't really know what the odds are at that time. So I don't know what the state of Iran was at the time, and like how big of a thing these guys were.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it's like a huge coincidence, or if it was like a thing where like they were like all over the place.
Right.
But that's an interesting thing too. It's an interesting question. But at the time, the Savak were particularly concerned with passports ending up in the anti-Shah underground. So this was a very big deal for them, all the fake passports. But even though this was some very deep shit, Charles was able to provide names of 2 anti-Shah activists, which I don't know how he got those names, but Charles was very involved in a lot of the like underground black market criminal life in a lot of these countries. And he'd been to Tehran before. He was in Tehran because he had contacts in Tehran. And that's why he wanted to go there first instead of, I mean, I think it was also on the way. But that's, I guess, how he knew these anti-Shah activists. So that with that information, they made a little trade, and he gave them those names in exchange for being handed over to the civilian court. And he's like, oh, these people can deal with this easy.
He just gets out of this so easy.
He gets out of everything so easy. And I'm like, is it because it was the 70s and there was like no like cameras and shit, or like, what is this? Why? But also he's just like ruthless and like doesn't give a shit, you know?
Yeah, I guess.
But also he does give a shit because he's like he gives a shit enough about Chantal to want to like go back and break her out, and like to go back to Paris, even though he's a fugitive, and get his daughter. And like,
yeah,
those are things where it's like, you think like, oh, this person is so ruthless. They don't give a shit about anyone except themselves. Clearly he does. Like, he still treats Chantal like garbage, but like he cares about her enough to go break her out. So it's very confusing, but that's like what's kind of interesting, I guess. So he ends up receiving a 1-year prison sentence, which he did end up serving in full.
Wow. Okay.
He tried to break out in October.
Of course.
He tried to break out, didn't, and never ended up working. But he was released in October of 1973. But also he, like, Charles typically has like a pretty good time in prison, because when he goes to prison, depending on where he is, but most of the time it's
like Carla's prison.
Not really. He's just like, he's like a celebrity in there among the criminals. Like
he's gotten out so many times.
Yeah, well, and if we remember in Bombay, he like got in with this really elite crowd by like selling stuff and like going to different countries and stealing things. And remember all like the shit with the cars and everything. Yeah. Like he really made a name for himself in the like underground world of like all of Asia.
Right.
Like he's like a really good criminal. And like, especially when he gets into prisons, he's like, he schmoozes people. He knows how to talk to people.
He seems good with people.
He is. And he's like, he knows how to be the type of person that other people want to be around, that other people think is interesting. Like, he just knows how to be top dog in these scenarios. And it's all based on bullshit and lies, but it works.
Yeah, it's interesting when serial killers are like charming like that, because I feel like there's like two sides of it. Like, you either have someone that's just like terrifying, Adam Strong, or you have someone that's very unassuming and charming.
Yeah, and those are the scarier ones because you don't assume.
They are. Yeah. I mean, yeah.
Adam Strong is just like disgusting, and you're like, ooh, gross. Like, I don't want to be around you. And like, he's got to trick you. Like, you got to get past that facade. But someone like Charles, you're like, oh, like he's like the popular guy at the party, you know?
Right.
And he knows how to like make himself valuable to other people. And that is something that gets him everywhere, because he presents himself as like somebody who can like give you things, who can get things for you. And then like only later you learn, oh, but like it's going to cost me my life.
Yeah.
So anyway, after he got out of prison, so he should have been, when he was released from prison, he should have been extradited back to Paris, where the original charges were. But he shimmied his way out of that and persuaded some guys, I don't know if they were guards or something to do with the prison, but some guys to basically smuggle him into Turkey. And he does not have to go back to France. So at this point, it's 1973. He's wanted in 8 countries, including France. Charles has corresponded with Chantal, who has, during that time, she was released from her sentence in Kabul. She had to wait around in Kabul for a little bit while her parents sent money, because like after she's like owed money for whatever reason, her parents had to spend time doing that. And then she went back to France with the daughter. To Charles's knowledge, he was hoping that she was still waiting for him, loyal as ever. But unfortunately for Charles, during that time she spent in Kabul after she was released, she met an American guy, and she came to her senses and decided to leave Charles for this American man. And so she was now divorcing him.
Damn.
Fucking go, girl. your life is back on track.
Right.
So Charles was very upset about this. This really affected him. He once again started feeling all these feelings of abandonment. He was like brought back to his childhood and blah, blah, blah. And all the work he had done over the last few years of like schmoozing and like becoming this awesome criminal had basically resulted in nothing. And he was a nobody. And he just had a little pity party for himself. Sad.
As one does.
So in October of 1973, Charles's younger brother, Guy, decided to come stay with him in Istanbul. Charles had not seen, and I think his name is not Guy, it's something else, but we're going to go with Guy now.
Alias.
Yeah, it doesn't really need to be, doesn't really matter. But he had not seen Charles since he was 16, and he was now 21. Guy had idolized Charles, kind of in the way, and I'm kind of assuming this, but based on how it was talked about, was kind of in the way that Charles had idolized his own father. So when Charles had called him out of the blue and asked him to come fly down to meet him, he was super thrilled. He wasn't doing too much at home, like he was a student and stuff, and they had traveled a lot when they were younger, but since they were in Africa, he hadn't really gone anywhere else. So he was like super psyched to like come out, meet girls, and see his brother, who he thought was super cool.
That's totally what they're going to be doing.
No. So as soon as Guy got there, Charles began to teach him his ways of swindling hippie tourists.
Sure, why not?
Which was kind of like what he was doing in India. So what he would do, he would
I like how it's like specifically the hippie tourists too.
Yeah, well, and it was that was I think like his bread and butter, but he also would find like if he ran into like a rich wealthy couple, he would go for them too. But I think that he very specifically resented and hated the hippie tourists.
Yeah, like the privileged ones, you mean?
Well, he like painted all of them with a very broad brush, but he like, you look at them and you think like they're kind of like dirty and gross, but like they're all doing a lot of drugs, like it's a lot of like hash, and like they're all he did find that they were all pretty much just like privileged white kids who had like saved up money to go travel and like not work at all and do drugs, and he really looked down on this lifestyle.
Yeah, I could see that being
from his very high horse.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, but I feel like anybody from that country would be like, you're here to like exploit us for your
it's true, but
privileged
it's like
vacation.
You're literally
it's very the Beatles.
Everyone. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, and like so but he found that the hippies, he liked going after them because they were very easy to manipulate. They were super easy to steal from, and they all had passports and traveler's checks. So even if they were not like super wealthy, like they had what he wanted. He needed passports.
Right.
So we'd go to their local hangouts and their bars and cafes and meet anybody. He would just literally just meet any person. And a lot of these people seemed super down and out and skinny on drugs. And as I was saying, they were actually just like spoiled students who did a lot of hash. So he would chat them up. He would allow them to invite him along to wherever they were going. And he would like pretend to be like a local guy who was just like a cool hip guy, like who, knew where the cool things were at. Uh-oh. And then he would steal from them. He would, drug them and then let them pass out and then steal from them. And as I said, many of them traveled with like large amounts of cash or traveler's checks, and all of them had passports. So they all did have something of value for him. And yeah, Charles thought they were scum anyway, so he had no qualms about taking things from them.
That's an interesting victim profile,
Yeah. Well, it's a very easy victim too. Because these kids,
that makes me like scared to ever talk to anyone if I ever travel again.
Yeah, they're all young and naive, and they're like looking to meet people. Like they're all like kids hanging out in hostels, looking to meet people, looking to just like have a good time, and like not assuming anything bad is going to happen to them.
And he knows how to be charming too, so it's just like,
yeah, and like
probably
who doesn't
easy prey.
Who doesn't when they're traveling some like doing like the popular thing was called the Hippie Trail, and it was like this trail throughout Asia. And
right.
like who taking that trip doesn't want to like meet a local person who can like take them to like the cool place that like they wouldn't know about otherwise. Like that's the
Yeah,
goal.
for
It's literally
sure.
the goal.
Yeah.
So um yeah, he would also find wealthier travelers, pretty much whoever. He was just like a complete opportunist. And so he was teaching Guy how to spike their drinks with laxatives, make them believe that they had dysentery, which is like a traveling, basically traveler's diarrhea or whatever. Um,
Right.
which luckily he would happen to have the cure for, which he had these vitamins that were like very helpful, but actually they were
Oh my
sleeping
God.
pills. And then the people would eventually pass out and then he would rob them and be on his way. And so like that's bad, but like not killing. It's like, okay, that's what he's doing. So
Right.
Charles and Guy they happened to come across a like very wealthy couple and they did just that. The wife was like, oh, I'm gonna pack. It was like their last day. So she stayed back at the hotel and packed, and Charles and Guy took the guy out. And they did this routine to him and they went back to the hotel and then like ended up spiking the woman's drink, and they ended up passing out and they stole a lot of shit from them because they were
Is
very
this
wealthy.
like,
So they had lots of like jewelry and money and everything. It got a little messy, I think, because the lady didn't go down right away. So they had to like punch her or something.
oh my God. Oh,
Like, this is nothing compared to what is to
I
come.
know. It's just to me, I guess just like because I've traveled and I've traveled on my own, and it's just like it put like obviously I guess I don't know. I guess you're just as vulnerable if you're like a victim in your own country, but being somewhere like far
Were
from home
you,
and that, you know what I mean?
well, yeah, because if you're in a different country and you wake up and your passport is gone, all your money is gone, everything is gone, you can't just
So
like call your
terrifying.
mom to come pick you up. Like, you're in a different continent.
Yeah.
So that's the scary part about it. And like you don't know how, like, depending on what country we're in, like this ends up mostly in Thailand, and like the Thai police are very corrupt at the time. They're not like the North American police where you can just call and like
So
probably
scary.
they're not gonna like cops generally here don't like ask you for money to like help you. They
Yeah,
do, or they did
exactly.
in Thailand at the time. So after that robbery of that couple, they headed off to Athens, Greece. In Athens, so I think at this point, like Charles, like gave Guy some money, sent him to Athens, and he's like, oh, I have to go do some business or whatever. And then he took most of the money and like showed up a couple weeks later. And Guy was like kind of annoyed because like Charles didn't give him very much money. He didn't like he gave him money, but like a very small percentage of what they had gathered.
Yeah.
And then he just like left him for like 3 weeks and never called, and then finally just showed up randomly one day.
Right.
And so then in Athens, Charles was like, okay, well, you go do one on your own. And so Guy went out and did a robbery on his own and was successful. He came back with a bunch of cash. He like did the laxative thing, the dysentery, blah, 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 the whole
Wow.
shebang. Um, and he got a bunch of cash. That day, he boarded a flight to Lebanon. He was very pleased with himself. He's finally out on his own. He's making money. He's living large with his very cool older brother. When all of a sudden, he's like sitting in a seat, ready to go to Lebanon. All of a sudden, a man walks up to him and starts accusing him of stealing from him. Turns out it was the guy that he robbed earlier that day, who happened to be on the same flight and who had like recovered from his passing out or whatever. So
I like that this person was confident enough to confront him.
yeah, I guess it was like a public enough place, and like
That's true.
so
That'll help.
the police were called and Guy's bags were searched, and they found a bunch of passports and this guy's money and passport and whatever. So off to jail he goes.
He's just not on his brother's level, really.
No, because nobody is.
Yeah.
His
Which
like
we are
he's
happy about.
yeah, he's operating on a very high level, right? So in jail, Guy was beaten until he ratted on Charles, basically, who later showed up in Guy's cell, and Charles was pissed. He convinced Guy to switch identities with him so that Charles could get out faster because Charles had warrants out for his arrest in Greece already. And he knew that he would be in way longer than Guy once they figured all this out. And so he's like, okay, switch identities with me because we look similar enough that we can just pretend we're the other person. And that way I can get out first and then I can come back and break you out. So poor naive Guy agrees to this. And the men looked similar enough that the plan worked. So for 1 year, Charles made many attempts to break out of prison. One time he gathered a bunch of guys to start digging a tunnel, and they got pretty far, but they were caught. And when that happened, they sent Charles to a maximum security prison, one that was like allegedly impossible to break out of, or like nobody had done it before.
Right.
When he was there, he faked the symptoms of another peptic ulcer. And
gross. The needle thing again.
Yes.
And also, where's he getting a needle? Why do you have that?
I don't know, but he basically whatever prison he goes to, he just becomes like the contraband guy. Like he gets like, you can sneak things in and out of prison, up the bum and such.
Sure, whatever.
And so he just like gets involved in that. Like there's always like an underground world where you can get shit, right? So he fakes the symptoms of peptic ulcer and got transferred to a different prison's hospital to be treated. When he was being sent back from the hospital, he was loaded into a truck crammed with other inmates, and he had smuggled a little, and like this, like so he smuggled a little bottle of cologne, like in another article I read, it was a little shampoo bottle filled with gasoline or like petrol or whatever. But in the book, they say it was cologne, but whatever, it was some sort of toxic substance or whatever, which he then used to set on fire. I assume somebody had a match or something, and he caused a fire. And so the guards got everyone, and that's a risky thing to do because you
could get burned.
You're locked in a very crowded truck, I guess it is.
That's scary.
But the guards got everyone out just in time. But Charles did manage to escape in the midst of all the commotion. Success.
You don't say.
Yeah. Basically, spoiler, he always escapes.
That's honestly pretty impressive.
It's extremely impressive. He is an impressive, intelligent guy. He's horrible.
Imagine if he had put his skills to some type of
better use. He is, and that's
some type of non-murdery kind of
he's
use,
just
maybe.
Like allergic to actual hard work, and he works hard but, for his own he has whatever he does, it has to be for his own personal selfish gain.
I think we talked about this last time, but once you're in I don't know the right word for this, but once you're in your career is in the illegal world, it's so hard to get out of it because it's what am I going to get a fucking minimum wage job now somewhere? I have no qualifications, I'm whatever age, and I've been around people like that, and it is really hard because they have to take a huge step down if they're going to try and enter that,
even if he I think he could have been very successful if he had just started any business, but it's in order to start a business you have to you're losing money for a little bit, and he's not ready to do that. And also it's when you're used to operating outside the law and doing things that are really unethical, it's really hard to go back from that if you still want to be gaining things.
Yeah, for sure.
If you know what I mean, because what, you're just gonna do things all the legal kosher route. No, you're not.
Yeah, why? What's going to incentivize you to do that in the short term? It's it's going to be years of crawling your way up, which I think could be worth it for him because he could have been really successful. But maybe he's fuck it, I already have such a bad past, there's no way.
Yeah, and if it's so easy for you, this doesn't sound like an easy life, but if it's something you're good at, what are you gonna do? As I said, he smuggled a bottle of cologne, which used to set fire, and then he escaped. Yep. Meanwhile, back in the first prison, Guy was still in prison. Everyone thought he was Charles still. And he was he realized Charles was not coming for him. So he's trying to get people to recognize his true identity.
Just so shitty.
Yeah, because and it's you don't want authorities to think that you're Charles Sobhraj, because there's warrants for him everywhere.
Right.
And finally, after Felix ended up writing to the authorities, because I think he got in contact with Felix, and then Felix wrote to these people. And one of the officers who had originally beaten him upon his first arrest recognized him. And so finally, the mistake was corrected. But Guy served 2 years and 10 months in prison, and Charles never came for him because he's a fucking asshole. So now it is 1975. Charles was free, and in the criminal world, he was this huge celebrity. He found out his father is actually dead, and that the Americans had just fled Saigon, who had just surrendered to the Viet Cong. So he was like, probably shouldn't go there. So they're in the midst of the Vietnam War, if that's unclear.
Right.
And he decides to head to India again. So and I think there's still warrants for him out in India, in Bombay, from the robbery, but I guess he's now going to go under a different name, right? He's got all these passports, so he just changes his identity. So at the airport in Kashmir, Charles met his future wife and partner in crime, and her name was Marie-Andre. And she was a small town girl from Quebec, Canada. Shout out, Canadian. She was traveling through Asia with a man who she was once in a relationship with, but after he had proposed to her, she decided that they were better off as just friends. But he was like clearly still really into her. Kind of a very weird situation. And then the two of them decided to go traveling together. All right, cool.
Okay.
But they met Charles because all of these people were on the same flight. After they get off the flight, Charles was talking to another French couple who he'd met on the plane and who he had planned to rob. And all three of them decided to share accommodations. So apparently one of the big common things to do there in Kashmir is rent a houseboat.
Oh, love that.
Sounds kind of cool.
Yeah, sounds really fun.
So Charles was like arguing with the guy because the guy was trying to get them to rent a 3-bedroom. They really only needed a 2-bedroom, but it was a really good deal. And so Charles was like, we don't want to pay for an extra room. We're not going to use it. And so he swindles in Marie-Andre and her companion, and this guy's name is Dupont. Don't know if that's his real name, but that's what we're going to go with.
Okay.
Marie-Andre is her real name. And so they decided to take this third room, and they all 5 of them would split a 3-bedroom houseboat to stay in for their trip. Okay. Marie-Andre was instantly taken by Charles. She found him super attractive. Very interesting. She loved that he was French, but he was like kind of exotic. You know, they at the time, like they're always referring to people as like exotic or like mixed blood, like things that we don't really say today anymore. But
yeah,
that was the time. And Charles knew right away that she liked him. Like he could just feel that instantly. It was very obvious, I guess.
Yeah.
She just like put herself out there at one point, and like partway into their stay at the trip, she like came up to him at night and was like, can I kiss you? And then
oh god,
which is like super cringy. And
it's like you have no idea what you're getting into.
Interesting though, she was like very forward as like a woman, and that's kind of cool.
Yeah, that's
and
true.
From that point on, he was like, okay, like she was wrapped around his finger. And so the thing with Marie-Andre and like her whole relationship with Charles is pretty fucked up, but like she was pretty like bored with her life. She was living in small town Quebec. She was like really looking for something more interesting. She was just coming out of this relationship that she had dropped because she found it to be like too mundane,
like boring.
I don't know.
Yeah.
So like
you can tell that vibe with her. That's probably why she was attracted to him.
Yeah, well, this person was like exactly what she was looking for, like some sort of adventure in her life, some like
just like
from another country.
Yeah, somebody whatever. Exotic.
And yeah, so he was kind of upfront with her, and he was like mean to her and like played hard to get kind of
but
thing.
That's what
like,
she wants.
Exactly. And he's like, I operate outside the law, like I'm a criminal basically.
And she's like, oh great.
And like Chantal, Marie-Andre naively found this very intriguing, and she didn't really take it too seriously or like concern herself with it.
Yes, I think we've all been there. I feel like.
But she found it super exciting, so
right.
She was like super down. So she decided, she was like, I'm in love with you. What ended up happening? Because he was like to her, you're like with another guy. I'm not gonna just like start dating you when you're like on vacation with another guy. And she's like, no, we're just friends or whatever. So then he went up to the guy the other day and was like, okay, like, are you cool if I just start like dating this girl? And the guy was very butthurt about it, but like, it was like, okay, like, what am I gonna do? So it was like kind of awkward. But the trip ended and she went back to Canada, but she with plans to return. And the other French couple was never robbed by Charles and just continued on to their trip. And they have no idea like how close they came to a very shitty situation. Wow. Probably they wouldn't have been killed, but because of this whole love triangle situation, he like was too busy to complete that robbery.
Right.
So Charles goes back to Bombay, and that's like really where he's still wanted for robbery. From Bombay, he went to Hong Kong, where so now this whole thing, he claims that he was involved in this like huge underground drug cartel that smuggled in heroin from Thailand to Europe. And this claim seems to remain pretty unsubstantiated, and we'll get to it later at the end. But just keep in mind,
I feel like I could see it.
It's not that it's just that like once we get into like the murders, he kind of like he makes it seem like all the victims were part of this, whereas I don't think that's necessarily, a lot of people don't think that that's the case.
Yeah. Okay.
So
okay.
I'm just saying like this is his story, and we'll get to later. He's also a huge liar. So
yeah.
Keep that in mind. But
that's the thing. Whenever it's from the perspective of,
yeah, exactly.
Murderer, it's kind of like,
especially like the really narcissistic ones who just lie constantly, which he is one of.
Fair.
So anyway, he claims he's part of this whole thing, and that's why he's there, and that's what he's doing, et cetera, et cetera. And so next he goes to Singapore, where he took a passport from a French geologist named Denis Gautier. And he uses the name Alain, which he was using at the time when he had met Marie-Andre, and he becomes Alain Gautier.
Sure.
I have a very shitty French accent. I'm really trying with the French because my kids going to French school, but it's really uncomfortable. I find trying to say a French accent, especially because Chris's family is all like very good at French. So I just feel like a failure. But anyway, this name would later become quite famous, Alain Gautier. Okay. So Charles calls up Marie and summons her to Bangkok, where he meets her. And she, when she got there, things were kind of like shitty right off the top. Marie-Andre was a very independent Quebecois woman. This was the time, like she's growing up in the midst of the like women's sexual liberation movement, where like women are finally like, you know, the feminist movement, and women are taking over their sexualities and all that stuff. So she's very like independent. She's Quebecois, so she's very independent.
Love that.
And she's like not shy about things. And Charles does not like her attitude, because he prefers his women to be very submissive and like,
of course,
like Chantal was basically,
like be dependent.
Yes, because he is an asshole. And he's just like, the way that she's like acting and like just saying shit, he's like, women don't do that. Like he's just a huge dick.
So annoying.
So at the time, he also has lots of other women on the go. One in particular, he really didn't want to give up. It was this Thai girl who owned a jewelry shop, and she was very useful to him for like translating and like holding hot items. And he
likes having like women accomplices, I feel like.
For sure. Well, it's also, he's very good with women. He's very attractive to women. So they're like, they make easy, like, and this woman, because he got her to fall in love with him. So she basically does whatever he wants. And like a lot of people so many people describe Charles as like very sexual. It's like, so, you know, it's easy for him to like find lots of mistresses or whatever.
Yeah.
So he introduces Marie-Andre to this girl as his secretary, and she's like, okay, don't love this, but she is like stuck it out so that in hopes that things would get better. She's like very confused because she's like super into him. She thinks he's so cool, so suave and sexy and whatever. But then she's like, I don't want you to be cheating on me, but she just doesn't really do anything about it.
Right.
So when her visa was expiring, Charles was like, okay, I'll go and extend it for you. Do you have any money? And so she gave her her last traveler's checks. So no more money, because he keeps being like, oh, let me just use your money. We're a couple. It's fine. And never paying her back. And then Charles did not extend her visa or pay her back. So now she is basically an illegal alien with no money. And so she's essentially his prisoner. Not that she couldn't do something about this, but she did at the time. She didn't even know. So pretty soon into their pretty rocky relationship, Charles and Marie-Andre just get wrapped up in this life of crime. And so she starts being his accomplice, basically. They would often pose as a wealthy couple and make friends with other wealthy couples at high-end resorts. And then they would do the whole spike their drinks with laxatives, make them think they had traveler's diarrhea, blah, 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 get vitamins, and then steal from them. And by the way, a lot of the drugs they were using at the time, they used Largatil, Quaaludes, and Mogadon were like the big ones.
Sure.
Charles was also becoming increasingly violent, and at some point,
oh, you don't say.
The drugging and robbing incidents turned into murder.
Go on.
The first known murder. He claims, and so again, this is where the Hong Kong drug thing comes in, but he claims that he got word that a man named Andre Raynaud had been sent to Europe, from Europe to Thailand to buy this big heroin drug ring to buy off local suppliers. And Charles wanted information from him, I'm air quoting here, that he could use to get involved in this heroin ring as an investor. So he says that he found this man on a train, befriended him, did his usual thing, drugging him, etc., and then like brought him to this hotel room. And while he was in a vulnerable but slightly conscious state, Charles began to beat him for information. And then once he got the information he wanted, he gave him a bunch more Mogadon and then left him in a bathtub with some extra pills sprinkled on the sink, and basically just left him there to die and drown. And this man was later found, pronounced dead, and the local police found that there was, quote, no trace of foul play. So he like properly set it up as what looked like a suicide.
Damn.
Now this was Charles' first official murder. And
I mean,
the first
technically he already did
the first like premeditated murder, I guess you could say.
Okay.
There was also another couple that they had met on a resort who he had like poisoned or whatever, and they left. And later these people ended up dying in a hospital, but like I don't even think Charles knew at the time because they had taken off. It was like the effects of it like later killed them.
Right.
But this was like the first like, I want to murder this person, and I did. Yes. And so then this, again, I'm saying like he's like says that it was this whole Hong Kong drug trade, that this is where it came from. And I think this is like what he's using to justify the murders. But these claims are sketchy at best, to my knowledge.
Right.
However, on that same train that Charles had met Andre, he also met a man named Dominique. This was a young French bank clerk on a tour of Asia. Charles had also drugged this guy into making him believe that he was sick, and brought him home to his new apartment where he and his wife, Monique, who is Marie-Andre is basically now going by Monique, would then nurse Dominique back to health. And I don't know if it's Dominic, but it's spelled Dominique, so I'm just going to go with Dominique. Okay. While Dominique was recovering from his illness, I'm air quoting, Charles took his passport and all of his money and hid it away in his safe. And then later when Dominique's like, where's my shit? He's like, oh, I put it in my safe, like, so it's safe, because I'm such a nice guy and I'm like looking out for you because you're sick. Charles and Marie-Andre told Dominique that they were gem dealers, and between his bouts of illness, Charles would bring Dominique around for tours of the city while also doing gem business dealings along the way, making himself look super legit, and also making Dominique like be friends with him and being like, look, I'm showing you all around the city. And like they became friends. And it seemed to Dominique that every time he started to feel better and decided it was time to leave, he would start to get sick again. And meanwhile, Marie-Andre keeps giving him this drink that is like a medicine to like help him, but he just keeps getting sick again.
Weird.
And he would get like so sick that he couldn't get out of bed. Like it was bad.
It's so fucked up.
But so this sweet young couple would just graciously host him and nurse him back to health. And he could not understand why they were being so kind to him. They're like, because now they're like taking him on, they're feeding him, they're housing him, they're not asking him for money. So then he feels too weird to be like, can I have my money back that you took from me? So he's basically living there. So then one day, a young Indian guy named Ajay Chowdhury showed up with Charles, and he never left. He ends up staying there too. So Charles said that he had met him while wandering the streets. Like this guy Ajay was lost, and from that day on, he was just always there. And the apartment just seemed to always be full of tourists and young people, and these were all potential customers. You see, according to Charles, he was able to get different types of gemstones right from the source and was able to cut out the middleman entirely. Since he was able to get them so cheap, they could be sold for an enormous profit. And this was enticing young travelers looking to make a quick buck, because he would sell these gems to different travelers for super cheap. So then they could like continue on their travels by selling these gems, or like being able to like take them home and sell them or whatever. So Dominique was now surrounded by all this, and he was often sucked in and asked to like pretend to be a satisfied customer, which he did because he felt obligated to, because they were being so nice to him. At this time, Marie-Andre was kind of happier. She was pretty happy when they initially moved into this new apartment. It was at this place, this apartment complex was called the Canet House, and it will become a very central thing in this story. But it was like a large 2 bedrooms, and it overlooked this big pool that was shared by all of the residents. So it was like pretty hip location and fun. And after they signed the lease for this apartment, she had like one nice night alone with Charles, and he like was really nice to her. So she was like, oh, things are going to be great. But very quickly, he's like doing all this business, and like he's gone all the time. She knows he's got other mistresses. He like makes her do all the cleaning and like taking care of people. Again, I'm air quoting here.
So annoying.
He's literally poisoning them, but like whatever. So she feels like a slave essentially. And just to have it in your mind that this entire time she keeps a diary and she's like writing everything that's happening constantly.
Does he know?
It's unclear. He definitely doesn't know like what she's writing. He's probably
I'd be shocked if he knew what yeah,
he's probably just like, oh, some like silly little girl writing her feelings.
Yeah,
like he's not taking that seriously, but it will come into
that's so shitty too for her, because I was like, how's she gonna get out of that?
Yeah, I mean,
like he's not gonna let you walk away at this point.
I believe she could have gotten away. I think what mostly keeps her there is her like literal addiction to him.
No, she's still into him at this point.
Oh, she's so into him the whole time. She's
right. Okay, that makes sense.
She's like people, like a lot of people. This other very central character who we'll meet in the next part, who like helped solve this whole thing. He's like she was addicted to him like heroin. Like she would do anything for him. Like she definitely like he groomed her to be that way, and like he specifically found something. He's like recognized that behavior in her and exploited it for sure. But if she really wanted to, like she could have gone away easy. He goes on trips for days at a time. She could have gone to the Canadian consulate, got herself a new passport, and been out the door, but before I get back easy.
Okay.
So yeah, so she was not happy. She was constantly having to host a bunch of strangers and just do whatever he asked her. And like
Yeah.
she never spent time with him. He still had multiple Thai women on the go, which really annoyed her.
My God.
But she was like super in love with him and just like committed herself to this life.
That's very sad.
So another central character that I think we should introduce here is a girl or a couple, Nadine and Remy.
Okay.
And they were a young French couple who lived in the same apartment building on the floor below them, the same building as Charles and Andre. Remy was a cook and he worked all day. And Nadine generally spent her time alone in the apartment. She sometimes worked for the Laotian embassy doing translation of different documents into French. And Charles introduced himself to her and like invited her over to hang out. So she's there all the time as well. And he enticed Nadine to work for him, bringing him clients to sell gems to, because she knew a lot of diplomats from her work through the embassy. And those were very ideal buyers for him. And they ended up buying a lot. And that kind of worked out really well. And she would end up spending a lot of time with Charles and Marie-Andre. And she got pretty close with Marie-Andre and like the people who visited the home. So now I'll introduce you Theresa Knowlton, who weirdly also, there's a lot of other sources that name her as this other name. What is it? It's like Janine Brown or something.
There's probably a lot of fake names, right, in this?
But this one, Theresa Knowlton, really seems to be her name.
Oh.
She's also sometimes named as Jenny Bolivar.
Okay.
And I don't know why there's the double names, but I'm pretty sure Theresa Knowlton is the real name.
Okay.
So one night, Ajay brought a guest over who he'd met at this place called Hotel Malaysia, which was a very popular tourist destination. I think it was a hostel. Lots of young people traveling Asia. That's where she was at the time. She was a 21-year-old American girl from Seattle, Theresa Knowlton.
Okay.
Theresa had a bit of a rough go at things at the beginning of her life and at home. She lived with her grandmother because things between her and her own mother were quite tumultuous. In high school, Theresa had gotten into drugs and she was very rebellious. And it was a lot for her grandmother to handle, but she did. And after high school, Theresa had gone on a trip to Asia with her boyfriend, and they went to Kathmandu in Nepal. And there she got super into Buddhism and like spirituality and all that type of stuff. Very like 70s hippie person. After coming home, she started community college, but she made a decision to take a year off again and go back to Kathmandu and become a Buddhist nun. And so she was traveling through the Hippie Trail, which was this very popular route that a lot of young backpackers would take during the like 50s to 70s hippie era. The most popular route being between Europe and South Asia, mainly from Turkey through Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, and Nepal. And we'll put up a thing just to show you. Theresa was a very outspoken American girl, and she was on this journey for herself. She'd like really kind of turned her life around in terms of like the drugs and stuff. So we find her at the Cannet House apartment, and she was chatting with everybody, Dominique and Marie-Andre, and she was telling all these like really hilarious stories about her sex life. And everybody was like, thought she was really cool and super hilarious. And Charles took an interest in her immediately. According to the book, Charles invited Theresa to stay at a hotel in Pattaya, which was a popular beach resort area in Thailand. And it would be like a fun last hurrah before she headed off to Nepal to become a nun. Like that's how he framed it. And there are a few different accounts, it seems, but the most common one was that Charles and Ajay had taken her out drinking. They spiked her drink. They gave her drugs to make her feel drowsy and pass out. Then they put her in a bikini and left her in the ocean to drown.
That's fucked.
As she's like drowsy.
I feel like drowning has to be one of the worst ways to die too.
Yes. And although like she was not like fully conscious, but yes, absolutely. It's a horrible way to go. And all of these things are a horrible way to go.
Yeah, that's true. I mean,
and you'll see it does escalate.
Shocking.
But so he claims that like she was, or no, I'm pretty sure that he does claim that she's part of this Hong Kong drug trade or whatever.
Okay.
But again, unsubstantiated. We'll get to that when he starts talking later. So a few days later, on October 18th, 1975, a fisherman found her body floating in the water, and they had to take a picture of her dead body and put it in the newspaper to try to find out who she was, because she had no identification on her. And she was buried in Thailand before her family had found out what actually happened to her, because it took a really long time for them to sort out who she was, get in touch with people. Remember, this is 1975. This is not the internet age. Yeah. So like this is a big part. Like this is how he got away with stuff for so long. It was hard to identify people, especially tourists in a different country, right?
True.
So Theresa is now dead. Everybody at the apartment complex is just like, oh well, she was going to Nepal. She's probably in Nepal now. That's fucked. So then the next hippie guests to stay with Charles and Marie-Andre was a Sephardic Jew named Vitali Hakee. Okay. Vitali was from a wealthy family now living in Istanbul who ran a very successful textile business, and he was due to inherit it. But Vitali had gotten super into drugs, especially after moving to Ibiza, Spain, which is like a notoriously party central, drug central. And again, according to Charles, he was part of this big heroin trade, and he was like a low-level smuggler of heroin he would smuggle from Bangkok to Europe. That's according to Charles. And this is, according to Charles, how he got his name. So Nadine remembered meeting him at Charles's apartment and thinking he was just like another kind of drugged out couch surfing hippie. And at this point, Nadine's husband, Remy, had started to get really suspicious of Charles. He's like, I have a feeling this guy just like doesn't seem right. And she kind of brushed that. Yeah. And she brushed it off. She was like, no, he's just a nice guy. But there were a couple instances that did make her think. Once,
I'm sure.
Yeah. So once she was out with Charles visiting different jewelry shops and chatting with clients and stuff, and she noticed in his bag there was a wig and like disguise stuff and glasses and a fake mustache, and she was like, why do you have that stuff? And he got all in her face about how dangerous this business could be and how he always had to be prepared. And that was weird because he'd always been super cool and nice to her.
Yeah, that's a weird way to react.
He just like got really defensive.
Yeah.
So another event that caused her to pause was when Vitali started feeling sick while she was staying with Charles and Marie-Andre.
Oh my God, I wonder why.
And she like offhandedly made this comment about the amount of people who got sick while staying with them. She's like, it's so weird.
Yeah,
and Charles made this big deal about how he had helped all of them, and like he was keeping them out of the hospital, and like they didn't have to pay any money and whatever. And he just made her feel really bad about that comment. He's
there
like,
See, that's what I thought he would have done with the other thing too. Like that's the classic, you know, that's the strategy.
Yes. And so then she's like, oh, I feel bad.
Oh my God, he leaves making her feel bad.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, you're literally poisoning people.
Yeah. And killing them.
Right.
And so Nadine at this point started getting super close with Marie-Andre. She noticed that Marie-Andre seemed like super unhappy, and she started to get a feel for like her and Charles's relationship and like how
I'm sure,
weird and toxic it was, like very obvious, especially for Nadine, because like there's a lot of people who are like coming in and out, and it's like easy to like, you know, fool those type of people. But Nadine lives there, so she sees them all the time, so she's seeing, you know, the patterns. And according to Nadine, Marie-Andre, who she'd only known as Monique, confided in her that her name was actually Marie-Andre and not Monique.
Mm-hmm.
And that Charles had made her change it, and that she and Charles were not actually married, but he made her say that because it looked better for business. And so she's like, oh, that's a
red flag.
A little bit weird among all the other things. So one night, Charles and Ajay took Vitali out, and they told everyone that they were going to see a gem wholesaler. And according to Charles, they tied him up in the back of the car gagged him, and told him that they would have some questions for him later because, again, he's allegedly a part of this drug trade in Hong Kong.
Okay.
They kept him like that for an entire night, letting him sit there in silence and fear. And the next night, they injected him with sodium pentothal, which is also known as truth serum.
Is that real?
Not really.
What makes it?
It's supposed to make you like more loose. Like it doesn't like, you don't inject someone with it and like that's the truth. It just it just loosens them up, I think.
Okay.
But that was like a thing, right? And so then they injected him with that. And they brought him to this secluded field in the middle of the country. And Charles says that he began interrogating Vitali, wanting the names of people involved in this drug smuggling operation. And Vitali apparently told Charles not too much. He said it was a small operation, which is a few like hippie people. And so Charles began to beat him. Finally, Vitali mentioned the name Stephanie Perry, who was on her way to Thailand and would be staying at the President Hotel. And then 2 people in Peshawar, a Turkish guy, a contact in Amsterdam, and a few more people. And then Charles like took note of all these people. Okay. Then Charles cut off Vitali's long hair just to be a sick bastard. And then he gagged Vitali, put him back in the car, and they started to go back the way they came, making it look like they were like got their information and they were leaving. But then they took Vitali to another secluded location, and they took Vitali out of the car. And Charles says that he snapped Vitali's neck.
Oh my God.
Then covered him in gasoline and set him on fire.
That's fucked up.
Charles would later say that he wanted his body to be found near Theresa because he wanted to send a message to this drug cartel that, like, you can't fuck with him, basically.
I mean, that'll send that message, yeah.
Yeah. So the next day, Vitali's body was found, and the police concluded that it had probably been a suicide.
Really?
Not sure how you conclude that.
Like themselves on, yeah.
Because he was clearly dead before he was set on fire.
Oh, they can tell that?
Well, his neck was snapped. Like you'll see later,
right.
Because later he sets people on fire, and it's like it's very clear when somebody dies by being set on fire because they're put in like they end up in a position where they're like in a position or like a position where they're obviously being lit on fire, right? Whereas if you kill somebody and they are like you don't find somebody in a relaxed dead position who's been set on fire. So that should be clear.
Oh my God, either way.
But yeah, they decided that it was probably suicide. So it's just super sketchy. Mind you, the Thai police at this point are very sketchy.
They just like don't care.
They and they're like very corrupt.
Right.
They said that they thought it was probably one of the Thai ex-employees from one of the former American bases who had been coming to Pattaya looking for work. So as I said, remember, the Americans had just fled Saigon. So there were all these people, I guess Thai people working at different bases for the Americans or whatever.
Okay.
And I guess all of them had just lost their jobs. I'm kind of guessing this. Wait a minute. Thai says, yeah. So I don't really know what this is all about, but there's a lot of Thai people who've just lost jobs because of the American.
Okay.
And apparently this was very common. Back at the apartment, just as Nadine and Remy were starting to get suspicious, so was Dominique separately, who at this point had pretty much been sick for 8 weeks in a row. And Dominique had seen 2 of Nadine's friends who recently had their money and passports stolen. And this was shortly after 2 French ex-policemen. Their names are Yannick and Francois. And they start staying with Charles because they had gone on a trip with Ajay. And during their trip, their money and passports were stolen.
So weird.
And so these men start living with Charles and working for him so that they can make back some money or whatever. And then not to mention that every time Dominique asks Charles for his passport and money, Charles makes up some excuse about why he can't go to the bank that day because his safe is at the bank, apparently. So it's all just very sus. And Dominique is starting to get suspicious of this, reasonably so.
Yeah, finally.
He's also beginning to suspect that his medicine that Monique has been giving him was actually making him sick.
Thank God.
He hadn't had it in a few days and was starting to feel better. So he decided to do an experiment by drinking some to see if he felt worse when he did.
And did he?
Yeah. And so
how about that?
This is where I'm going to end it for this part. So
Okay.
we're ending it on like Nadine and Remy starting to get a little suspicious, Dominique getting suspicious, doing a little experiment, finding out that he's essentially being poisoned, but
it's crazy.
No access to his passport, no money. He's kind of stuck in Thailand.
Damn.
And that's where we will cut off the story for today. And next week we will continue. I'm not sure if this is going to be a 3-part or a 4-part still, because I feel like there's a lot left, but there's going to be a couple more parts. Let me just, yeah, and I think that's a good place to end it.
My God, yeah. I can't imagine being in any of those situations.
Isn't it like so terrifying?
It's so scary, and it's so far outside of like what I have ever experienced.
Yeah.
I just don't know what I do.
Yeah, and it's like that's where it's like you really can't be trusting of strangers. You shouldn't be.
Yeah.
In any situation, but like,
never,
especially when you're traveling and you're always, if you're traveling in a different country, you are more vulnerable. You are relying
just always
on the fact
assume that everyone's out to murder you.
Yeah. Okay. The other day,
honestly, it's better that way.
This is so funny. We went to IKEA and got the kids.
I love IKEA
bunk beds. Yeah, it was lit. I had so many meatballs. And it's like we went in the evening, so it was like dark when we were leaving. It was like 8:00.
Did you go to the one near my parents' house? Sorry.
No, we went to we now live closer to the West End one.
Okay.
But we're leaving, and like Chris went out to the car with one kid, and Isla was crying about some ice cream or whatever. So I was like, taking my time with her and like meeting them back in the car. And so Chris had no one in the car, and I just get to the car with Isla, and he's like, "Oh, there's a guy over there who needs like a jump start, and we have this like extra battery jump start cable thing." Right? I was like, what? It's dark. And so like I look around.
It's dark.
I look and I'm like, "Chris, keep your wits about you." And he's like, "What?" And like later I'm like watching out the window the entire time. I've got the kids in the car. I'm like, fuck, this guy's gonna try to like kill him. But then I noticed like that guy's wife and daughter come back, and I'm like, okay, well, Charles Sobhraj also had his daughter along for the ride.
I know that's not necessarily an indication that like
it was fine. The guy was not a murderer.
Yeah, that's good.
A recent immigrant from Germany and seemed like a nice guy.
I mean, but I don't know. You never know. They seem
nice. Chris was like, "What do you mean? He was like 2 feet shorter than me. What was he gonna do?" And I'm like, "You'd never know." Like he could poison.
And also, sorry, Chris, you have tall male privilege. Like, you cannot feel that safe when we're walking around.
I instantly, when he's like, "Oh, I'm just gonna go jumpstart this guy's car," I was like, "You're gonna die. Like you're gonna."
Yeah. Are you sure you want to take that risk?
Yeah. But we all survived the incident.
I'm glad
we got out of it unscathed. Thank God.
Yeah, I mean,
but yeah, just like keep your wits about you. That's my advice.
Agreed.
Yeah. So, any thoughts so far?
He's pretty fucked up.
Yeah, and I think it's very clear he like likes to, and like after what happens to him, like after he gets caught, it's like so fucked up. It's such an interesting story, and I just feel like I saw this. The BBC did this series. I told you about it, The Serpent,
right?
And it was on Netflix, and it did really well when it came out, and it's a really good series. But other than that, I never see the story told on podcasts and stuff. I could not find a whole lot of videos about it and stuff. And I think it's probably because a lot of people, at least a lot of people that I listen to, are like North American based. It's a lot of like North American stuff.
Definitely.
I'm sure maybe if I looked into like
I think
like
there
podcasts from different places. Like I listen to
right.
mostly podcasts of people from North America, so that I don't think it's crazy. But the victims are mostly all Westerners, so
that's true. Well, from what I've seen, most of the serial killers are from like America and English-speaking places, but then like other
there's
places
a lot
still
of
have
places.
them.
There's a lot.
Other places have them, but just not in the same numbers.
Is that true? There's a lot of Asian. There's a lot of Asian serial killers.
Are there?
Yeah. I don't know statistics. It'd be interesting to find out because I do not know the numbers. But it also could be like a difference in catching.
Yeah, that's true. And how many are reported?
Yeah. And that would be like a difference between the different like criminal justice systems and stuff like that.
Yeah. All I know is if I'm ever traveling, I'm not talking to anybody.
Yeah. There's a lot of crazy Australian killers, I find.
Oh.
I've heard of a lot of them.
Well, pros and cons, because living in Australia would be pretty cool, but
seems pretty dope. It seems like
shut up my ass, but
yeah.
I
don't know though. A lot of bugs, a lot of snakes.
Well, I don't really mind that.
Well, poisonous snakes will get you.
Yeah, but you don't have to like go near them. They're not like
but they just get in your house.
Oh, do they?
Have you ever watched the there's this pretty cool little documentary about the Black Mamba, which is like the most
the most dangerous snake. Yeah.
And it's like there's these guys in Australia who just like come out there, like if you find one, you call them and they come in like shorts and have a bag and they just like grab them.
Yeah, that is reptile.
Sir, you're gonna die.
Like. Yeah.
Put on some full pants.
One time, I knew this guy and he was telling me about how like, because I bought a snake from this like snake breeder, and he was telling me about how his friend has spitting cobras, and when you go into his apartment, you have to wear like protective goggles. It's like, really?
You want to live like that?
Yeah. Why do you choose to live this way? I dated a guy who had a 12-foot reticulated python that lived free inside his basement. And when he'd go down there, if she was hungry, he'd take a big dog, like, you know how, I don't know if you guys know this, but dog crates have this like plastic tray at the bottom of them. Yeah. So picture like a plastic tray that's big enough to fit a dog, and he'd walk around with it like a shield. And I'd go down there with him and we'd be like, okay, where is she? And then you're like, oh, I don't see her. And then she's up on the wall. It's like, why do you live like this?
You don't have to have that. Like,
yeah. Like,
I like snakes.
Keep her in an enclosure, like a
I
normal
think
fucking
snakes
person.
Are cool.
Yeah, I think
like
they're cool too.
I had one as a pet. Hannah has them as currently.
Yeah, I have them, but mine are smaller. Like they're not 12 feet.
You couldn't,
and they live in enclosures. Yeah,
yeah. That's like the poisonous ones. Here, like, actually. Why have that? Why have a?
I know.
Why have something that could poison and kill you?
Yeah, I know. It's weird. Or like literally constrict you. Like the retics, those snakes that
are like they big enough to constrict a person?
A 12-foot python? Fuck yeah.
I guess they could constrict, but could they eat you? Like, what do they usually eat?
I don't think they could eat you, no. But I think
if they get around your neck, they could definitely.
Not that side could probably eat you. A Burmese python or an anaconda could, or a what's the other one? Maybe a big reticulated python, but they could strangle you. Like, it's definitely happened before, but they eat like rabbits and stuff. Too. Yeah, they could definitely get kids.
Yeah, there was a really bad incident in somewhere in the East Coast where these kids were sleeping over at this other kid's house, and they lived above a pet store that had these huge reticulated pythons, or I don't know if it was or whatever snake it was, huge snake.
That's a popular, either that or Burmese probably.
Yeah, and it like snuck into the
oh my god,
killed the kids.
That's fucking terrifying.
And when I had a snake, my mom was like, what about that?
Yeah, your snake is like this big.
It's a ball python.
It's a ball python. It's basically the lab of snakes. Yeah. It's not gonna fucking do anything.
Yeah.
I love my ball python. She's so sweet.
They're cute.
Yes, so cute.
Anyway, let's end it there before we go on too much about snakes.
Thanks for listening.
It's a very controversial topic. A lot of people really don't like snakes. I found out by having a snake. But anyway.
Weird.
Please check us out on Instagram at Who's Knocking Podcast. Email us hello@who'sknockingpodcast.com. We have a Twitter. We got a Facebook. You can find them if you want them.
Instagram.
Please stick around for the next part. Please watch us on YouTube and subscribe to us. That would be awesome. Rate, comment, subscribe. We would love that. And remember to stay safe out there, because you never know
who's knocking.
Good eye. My Australian. This podcast is produced in collaboration with Lost Line Media. Artwork by August Digital. Music by Matthew Cook.